Hi and welcome to the engineering school. In this video series we will go through the basics of computer-aided design, so no prior knowledge is required. You will learn about sketching, solid modeling, assemblies and drawings. But in this episode we're gonna focus on sketching, so let's get started. The first thing that we will do is to create a new part in ZW3D. And if you haven't already got the program, you can download it by clicking on the link in the description down below. So to create a new part, we choose the new icon in the top left corner and we choose part/assembly and we name it CAD-beginner. Okay, confirm. So this is what it looks like when we create a new part in ZW3D. We have our three main axes and planes. And where they all intersect is where we have our 0 point or origin. And this is basically to determine where our part is in space. If we didn't have the point of origin, we wouldn't know where our part was in relation to anything. It could just be floating around in space. And when we design and construct geometry, we normally want to control it with dimensions so that we can design to specific values. And that's where we use sketches. So to create a new sketch in ZW3D, we click on the sketch icon in the top left corner. And here we can see that we have some things that we need to specify before we can create our sketch. It says that we need to define a plane. In this case we have three planes to choose between: the XY, the XZ and the YZ planes. And the reason why they are called this is because when we sketch on the XY plane, for example, we can only sketch in the X direction and in the Y direction. The Z axis is not available because we are creating a two-dimensional sketch. In our case, we choose the XY plane. And then we have the option to choose the point of origin of our sketch in relationship to the point of origin of our part. You see that depending on where we hold the point on our screen, the point gets assigned a specific value on each axis. For example, if we only move the point in the X direction, the value only changes in the X axis. And if we go past the point of intersection in the other direction, the value changes to a negative value. And the same thing goes for the Z axis. Here we have a positive value, and past the point of intersection we have a negative value. And the same goes for the Y axis. So this is very good to know if you want to place a sketch on a specific location. But in our case we want these values to be zeroed. So we tap in 0 in the X, Y and Z axis. And confirm. Normally the default value for our main planes is already at 0. So we don't really need to fill in those fields. Okay, so now we are in sketch mode and you can see all the tools we can utilize to create our sketches. We have some basic tools and some advanced tools. But we're not gonna use all of them in this episode. We're gonna save some of the commands to the more advanced lessons. But you see that we have commands like lines, polylines, circles, rectangles. Then we have commands to create more advanced curvature and commands to edit our geometry. So let's start by creating a circle. We click on the circle command and we want to define our circle by its diameter, and 50 mm is okay. We just place it in the middle of the screen. Click OK, and then we want to create a rectangle. We also want to define it by its center, and we want it to be 300 times 150 millimeters. We also place it in the middle of the sketch and confirm. Around our sketch entities you can see these small symbols like this, this and this. And when we hold our cursor over the symbol, we can see to what this constraint applies to. First we have a perpendicular constraint, this constraint right here. And you can see when we hold our cursor over the symbol, these two lines highlight. And this means that this constraint applies to these two lines. And that they are perpendicular to one another means that it is exactly 90 degrees between them. No more, no less. We can measure it real quick to see if it's correct. Okay, 90 degrees. Good. So now we can delete it because we don't need it. We also have a parallel constraint between these two lines and these two lines. And what it means is that if we move this line, the other line will follow and stay parallel to it. Then we also have a horizontal constraint on this line, which means that this line will stay parallel to the x-axis in this case, because in this sketch plane the x-axis represents the horizontal axis and the y-axis represents the vertical axis. So let's delete this constraint and see what happens. We do that by clicking on it and pressing on delete. And now you can see that we are free to rotate the entities. But notice that the sketch entities still stay correct to one another. That's because we still have some constraints between them. So let's delete the perpendicular constraint and see what happens. We click on it and press delete. Okay, so now we can manipulate the geometry even more. Let's delete the measurements and the remaining constraints. So once again, here we click on the constraints and we press delete. So now we have lost all control of our geometry. In the left menu, we have this minus sign before our sketch. This means that the sketch is underdefined. There's another way to see if the sketch is well defined or not, and that is to turn on the color coding. One way to do this is to click on this icon, or we can go over to the Constraints tab and click on the Constraint Status command. Okay, so here we have 4 different color codes: overdefined, underdefined, unsolved, and well-defined. And our geometry changes color depending on which status it is in. For example, our circle is fully defined, therefore it's blue, and our lines are still underdefined, and they are black. And our goal is to make the entire sketch well defined. So to do that, let's add some constraints. But before we add any constraints, let's drag the lines to make it look somewhat similar to what it was before. Okay, that's good enough. In the Constraints tab, we click on the Add Constraints command. Then we choose these 2 lines and we want to make them parallel. And we click on OK. Then we choose these 2 lines. We also want to make them parallel and confirm. And we choose these 2 lines and make them perpendicular. And the last constraint is to make this line horizontal. Okay, so now let's add some measurements. We choose these 2 lines and we make it 300 as it was before, and the other measurement we want to make 150. And now you can see that our sketch is well defined. So to demonstrate, let's make the sketch overdefined. You see that we have this perpendicular constraint over here, and if we would add a parallel constraint between these 2 lines, it would not be solvable. So let's add it and see what happens. Okay, we choose these 2 lines and we click on the parallel constraint and confirm. Okay, so now our sketch is overdefined. You can see that it's red and we have a plus sign before our sketch in the left menu. And the neat thing about ZW3D is that it shows you what constraints are unsolvable. So here we can see that the parallel constraints are yellow. So we delete it and everything goes back to normal. We update the sketch and you can see that everything goes back to normal in the left menu as well. So now we want to add a cutout to our sketch. We go back to the Sketch tab. We can start by adding a chamfer. Let's make it 100 millimeters times 45 degrees and confirm. Then we can choose the polyline command and make a cutout on the top of our part. Looks good. Confirm, and we can make an angled cutout with the line command. We make 2 lines and we finish it with an arc. Okay, and confirm. Now you can see that our cutouts are somewhat finished, but it's still a closed geometry. So to remove the intersecting edges, we can use a command called power trim. And we click and hold and just drag over the lines we don't want to keep. Okay, so after adding the cutouts, you can see that our sketch is no longer fully defined or well defined. So we want to make it well defined once again. We can start by adding a line to drive the position of our cutout. And we want to make this line construction geometry so that it is not included in our later commands. Okay, so now let's go over to the Constraints tab and click on Add Constraints. And we can make the arc and this line tangent to one another. Then we make these two lines perpendicular so that it is exactly 90 degrees between them. And we drive the angle of that line with the chamfer and make them parallel. And to add the last constraint, we make this line vertical. So now when we have added all our constraints, let's add the final measurements to make our sketch well defined. And when we are adding our measurements, we want to keep everything as clean as possible so that it is easy to understand even for someone who hasn't designed the product. You can see that we changed the values to make it an even value. We don't want to have uneven values if it's possible. Also notice the difference it makes when we pull out our dimensions to the sides. It makes it really easy to see what dimensions are driving what features. And here you can also play around with the different measurements, see what happens when you change certain values. For example, the angle value, you can drive the angle of the cutout, or you can position it in a different place. So now when we have added all the constraints and dimensions and made our sketch look clean and easy to understand, we want to add some fillets and some holes. So to do that, we can go back to the Sketch tab and click on the Fillet Chain command. And we can choose the radius to be 10 millimeters in this case. We right click and click on Quick Chain Pick, and this will automatically choose all the edges for us. So we confirm that, and now we want to add the holes. We make them 9 millimeters and we make them concentric with the radiuses. Let's confirm that, and our sketch is finished. Now you can see that our sketch is fully defined, so we can exit the sketch mode and we can go to the extrude command, and here we choose 10 millimeters. Click on OK. Then we can go to the chamfer command and add a 2 millimeter chamfer. And once again we want to click on the quick chain pick and we choose these two edges and confirm. And just like that we have created a simple base plate. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's lesson. In the next episode we are going to explore the basics of solid modeling. And don't forget to visit our website theengineeringschool.com, where you can sign up for free lessons and get a more streamlined experience. You can also email me if you have any questions about the courses or if it's something that you don't understand, and I will try to answer it. And don't forget to check out the sponsor section on our website, where you can see the companies that are helping and supporting us to give you all these lessons for free. So thanks for today, and I will see you on the next episode.